Reading these Epiphany texts today, you may come to the conclusion that today we really should be celebrating those people in our lives, in our history, who have been the right people in the wrong place at the right time. If you pause and think, I don't know if those kinds of people come to your mind or whether you've seen them in your lives, but they're there. If you've ever read or come across The Emperor of Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee, who wrote about the history of the treatment of cancer, one of those people that jumps up very on the first page is Sidney Farber, a man who was born in Buffalo, New York, in a Jewish family, who went to the State University of New York and was very successful and set his mark on going to medical school, but because he was a Jew in the 1920s, that was not the right place for him to be. And so he took advantage of his ability to speak German and went to medical school in Germany and excelled to such a degree that he was able to transfer back to the United States to Harvard Medical School to begin a second year in medical school, where he studied pathology. All those CSI fans know who the pathologists are. But that was his field, and he found his way into a residency at the Children's Hospital in Boston where he did the pathology, he did the autopsies for the hundreds of children who would die there throughout the year. And he was depressed and distressed, to say the least, at the frequency and the belief that there was nothing that could be done to change the fact that particularly the children dying of leukemia, that there was nothing that could be done for them. And so he set about the pursuit of trying to find a way to treat children with leukemia so that they need not die. Now, this was a very odd thing when you think about it. A pathologist, the person who does the autopsies, going to the hospital and saying, I want to work on this. And all the pediatricians, according to Siddhartha, all the pediatricians and all the oncologists says, this is not the place for you. You are not the right person in this place at the time when you should be doing this at all. So he went back to Harvard Medical School and was able to obtain grants and to study, and he made the transition from being the father of pediatric pathology to being the father of chemotherapy for the medical treatment. He defied people. He defied the wisdom of the time that said that you were not the right person in this place to be doing this work, because the way we treat this is not the way you propose to do. It is through the surgery that we do, that we try, even in our failures, it's through our surgeries that we try to do our treatment. You are not the right person, and yet he was. He was, and so we benefit from the cascading history of the treatment of the cancers that have affected people in our families, in our lives, perhaps even ourselves, are due to this man who turned out to be the right place in the wrong place, the right person in the wrong place at the right time. This thing about the surgery goes back to 440 BC, way back, this tradition that the way you treat these cancers is by cutting. And the first record of surgery was actually the Queen of Persia, Queen Atusa, the Queen of Persia, who was the daughter of Cyrus the Great, finding a lump in her breast and having her slave take a knife and cut it out. The first lumpectomy, I guess. She cut it out, and we don't know whether it was a permanent healing or not, but one might wonder whether this woman, where did this slave come from? Who had the audacity to do it? But in Persia at that time, what is now Iran, they practiced surgery, and there, in the texts of that day, there is instruction for using a golden-edged knife for surgery. And not only do we have this story of a lumpectomy, but also stories of cesarean sections for great births to occur. 400 BC, before Christ is born, 4 centuries before, even the archaeology finds markings on skulls that they were doing surgery on heads. It is likely that somehow she was influenced, this slave who was named Damasitis, was influenced by the Zoroastrians, the religion, a dominant religion. Zoroaster, who had founded this religion, a monotheistic religion, perhaps 600 BC or 1000 BC, that's not clear. But out of that came cascading this desire to work out these things, and not only in the field of medicine, but Zoroaster became the father of astronomy, the father of astrology, the reading of stars and the interpretation of them. And he had been born, the father of this great religion, into the tribe of the Magi, one of the 6 tribes of the Medes, one of the 6 tribes that were merged together into Persia by Cyrus the Great. We've lost the names, except that in this astronomy, the early visionaries of an egg-shaped universe that was filled with little round objects that were floating in a planetary system, in the stars and the moons and all of that, in this father out of this Zoroaster who was a magi, we find our way into a story that we've read in today's gospel. The story of 3 magi, 3 Iranian, some people think they were priests, some people think they were gifted people who watched the stars and read them, and could tell, even when they saw an event, they could time it to the very moment a star appeared, according to our text, that the star appeared and they followed it. They followed the star because in that time the interpretation of the stars is this is a major cosmic event, and when those events are occurring, great people are going to be born. We will follow the star to find who this is, who this new person will be. And so we have this story that has them arriving in the court of Herod, and Herod encounters them, and they are not the people he expected or wanted to see. They came to him and said, where is this new prince to be born? And it's somewhere near here. We've been following the star. We are magi who've read the stars, and we are following them to their conclusion. Such is our desire, our impetus, our will to find where it takes us. And it says in your translation, the translation we read, that Herod and all Jerusalem was afraid. The word in Greek actually means that they were agitated, they were stirred up, they were roiled up like the waters. If you remember the story of the angel appearing to Mary to tell her that she was going to become pregnant by God, the same word, she was agitated and stirred up and confused and upset, troubled by what this was. And Herod, the powerful one, the one who was supposed to know everything that was going, in fact, with his secret police made a point of knowing everything that was going on in his kingdom, did not know what was going on. And so he turned to his priests and his scribes and said, tell me, where is this supposed to happen? I don't know. I'm embarrassed. And they tell him in Bethlehem in Judea. And he tells these magi, go to Bethlehem in Judea, and when you find this child, come back and tell me. And they do. Well, they go, they follow, they continue to follow the star. And it says when the star came to rest over the house where Jesus was with Mary and Joseph, they were filled with joy. They were overwhelmed with joy. They were not the right people in the right place at the right time. They were the wrong people, but they were the people who were there to see that God, living in their presence, coming into their presence as a child, was there entering the world, and they suspected that they needed to go back to their country by a different way, and that's what they did. They were not welcome. They knew that, but they were in the right place to see the life-changing event that was taking place. Paul, you could say, as he writes to the Ephesians, he was not the right person for the job, and he acknowledges that. He's constantly defending himself. He's embarrassed. He was not an apostle. Well, he was an apostle, but not because he spent time with Jesus. He had never met Jesus. He had never seen Jesus. He had never walked with Jesus. And so all the others, Peter, James, John, they all looked at him as kind of an odd duck out. But he talks in this letter, as he's writing to the Ephesians, about how he had this vision that the mystery, God's mystery, was solved because through a revelation that came to him. And how the mystery was made known to me by revelation, and as he wrote down to the Ephesians, a revelation. What good was that? But in the former generations, he notes that the mysteries of life were not made known to humankind, not to you or to me. They were restricted to a very few, the solutions, the mysteries. But Paul becomes aware that revelation opens his eyes to God coming into his life and giving him a vision of purpose and plan that God has for him in the future, and that he is called, even though he does not have all the qualifications for the job. He is called by God to become a messenger to the Gentiles. Now, his disqualifications, he was not, people questioned his qualifications, but also you may recall that he was the ringleader of the stoning of Stephen, the assassination of one of the disciples of Jesus who was out doing the work of the Lord. And because of that, the people in the early church really didn't want to accept him. They had trouble. And you remember on the road to Damascus, as Ananias did not want to take him in, did not want to take him home. He was not the right person for them. And yet he still says that I have received this revelation and that this mystery is becoming open to me so that the Gentiles, the people who are not the right people to receive and to know and to understand what God's purpose is in their lives, that they have become fellow heirs, members of the same body and sharers of the promise in Christ Jesus through the gospel. All those people who don't belong here are now members of the family, all of them. And on this gospel, he says, on this good news, I have become a servant. I have been called, and I dedicate myself as a servant according to the gift of God's grace, not because I've earned my way, not because I'm qualified, because I've achieved qualifications, but because God has graciously opened my eyes to see and given me a voice to speak. Although I am the very least of all the saints, I am the least. This grace has been given to me to bring to all the people who really don't fit in the news of the boundless riches of Christ, and to make everyone see, everyone, not just the insiders, not just the outsiders, everyone, what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God who created all things. Now, there's a double edge to this story and the accounting of this story. One is that many of us have known what it is to be an outsider and know the importance of what it is to receive the message that says, you're not an outsider anymore, you belong. You are a member of this family, you are an heir of the kingdom. But there's another message that comes with it that becomes very personal. And that is that it just may be that in 2015, you may find that you are perhaps not feeling like you are the right person in the right place at the right time. But in God's eyes, you may be just that. You may be the best person at that place, at this moment, to carry out something that you are called to do, whether it's curing cancer, whether it's following a star into a strange land, into strange courts where you say awkward things and make people feel uncomfortable and distressed, or it may be that you may be the bearer of great news to a great number of people. All those things are possible. And in the gospel today, That is affirmed because three magi, three Iranian men, made a trip into a strange court where a powerful man was scared of them. And yet they did it. And when they found, when they discovered, when they came to that moment where they encountered the end of their trip, they were filled with joy. And only imagine the joy and satisfaction of the great discoveries of those people who in our lives were told that they were the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time, but found out through their persistence that they were so blessed that they were able to bring great blessings to all those whom they touched. If there is a New Year's wish that I can extend to you, it would be that. Regardless of how your self-esteem is feeling, your self-regard, regardless of what qualifications or disqualifications you have abundantly in your life, may you always be so blessed that those whom you touch are truly blessed by God because you have been with them. And if you can do that, then joy will be yours in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening, and in all the days of your life. That is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God.